Picture this. You arrest a black woman at a gas station, ignore her when she tells you she's a federal judge, laugh in her face, book her anyway. Then hours later, you walk into court for your own civil rights trial, and she's the one wearing the robe. That's exactly what happened to Kendall County deputies Barrett, Kline, and Harlan Thompson. And what they didn't know was that Judge Serena Caldwell had just spent the worst night of her life saying goodbye to her dying mother. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this story. Now, let's see how a federal magistrate judge ended up handcuffed at a shell and how 2 deputies ended up facing her in court the very next morning. Serena Caldwell wasn't expecting to spend Saturday night in a jail cell. At 52 years old, the federal magistrate judge for the Northern District of Texas had spent 27 years building a reputation for fairness, precision, and unshakable composure. She'd presided over drug conspiracies, immigration hearings, complex federal litigation. She'd stared down cartel lawyers and DOJ prosecutors without flinching. But on a cold morning, none of that mattered. The ICU family waiting room at Medical City Plano smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. Serena sat in a vinyl chair that squeaked every time she shifted her weight. Her mother's favorite shawl folded across her lap. Dr. Voss had just delivered the words with careful, practiced compassion. Hours, maybe a day. The pneumonia had won. Evelyn Caldwell, former school teacher, deaconess at Mount Zion Baptist, and the woman who'd worked double shifts at the post office to send her daughter to Yale Law, was slipping away. Serena hadn't cried yet. She'd learned early in her legal career that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in courtrooms, where every gesture was scrutinized, every emotion weaponized. But sitting alone in that waiting room, watching the second hand of the wall clock drag itself forward, she felt something crack open inside her chest. She'd thrown on the first clothes she could find hours earlier when the hospital called. Black leggings, an old Yale Law sweatshirt with a fraying collar, white sneakers. Her hair, usually pinned in a neat bun beneath her judicial robes, hung loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no jewelry, except the small gold cross her mother had given her at law school graduation. She looked nothing like the federal judge who'd sentenced a corrupt sheriff just weeks earlier. The memory surfaced unbidden. She'd been 9 years old, sitting in the back of her father's pickup after a traffic stop in rural Texas. The officer had made Ronan Caldwell step out, made him show his hands, made him explain why he was driving through a white neighborhood at night. Serena had watched her father's jaw tighten as he produced his veteran's ID, his voice steady, even as humiliation burned in his eyes. Months later, Ronan Caldwell was dead, found beaten in a ditch off Farm Road. The investigation went nowhere. No suspects, no witnesses. The case file grew cold. Afterward, her mother had held her close in the small kitchen of their apartment. Evelyn had made a promise without words, one that Serena felt in her bones. "You're going to make the system work for us one day." Serena had kept that promise. First in her family to earn a law degree, federal public defender for years, magistrate judge at 45, appointed by unanimous consent of the district court judges. She'd made the system work. She'd made her mother proud. Now Evelyn lay in the room, machines breathing for her, morphine drip keeping the pain at bay. The nurse had suggested Serena go home, get some rest. The doctors had done everything they could. It was just a matter of time now. Serena stood slowly, her knees protesting after hours in the waiting room chair. She folded the shawl, placed it gently on the seat, and walked down the fluorescent-lit corridor to her mother's room. The machines beeped in steady rhythm. Evelyn's chest rose and fell mechanically. Serena bent down, kissed her mother's forehead, whispered words meant only for the two of them. Then she left. The air hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. The hospital parking lot stretched empty under harsh sodium lights. Her black Mercedes sat 3 rows back, coated in a thin layer of frost. Serena walked slowly, each breath forming small clouds in the cold. She needed gas. The fuel light had been glowing amber. She couldn't think about tomorrow, couldn't process the inevitable phone call that would come. She could only move forward, one small task at a time. The Shell station on the highway sat just outside Plano proper, the kind of place that served late-night truckers and insomniacs. Pumps under fluorescent canopy, a small convenience store with barred windows, empty, except for a single semi-idling near the air pump. Serena pulled up to the pump, swiped her card and began fueling. The numbers rolled slowly on the digital display. The cold seeped through her sweatshirt. She should have grabbed a jacket from the trunk, but the thought seemed too complicated. Headlights swept across the station. A Kendall County Sheriff's cruiser rolled in, slow and deliberate, and parked perpendicular to her Mercedes, blocking her exit. Serena felt her stomach tighten. She knew this dance. She'd seen it play out in depositions, in courtrooms, in the stories her father used to tell. The performative authority, the casual entrapment. 2 deputies stepped out. The first was broad-shouldered, with a crew cut and a jaw that suggested a lifetime of clenching. His nameplate read Kline. The second was younger, thinner, with nervous eyes that darted between Serena and his partner, Thompson. Kline approached with the swagger of a man who'd never been told no. His hand rested on his belt, fingers drumming against the radio clip there. He informed her she matched a description, possible vehicle theft. He needed to see identification. Serena set the pump nozzle back in its cradle. The display read, "Gallons." She turned to face Kline fully, her voice calm and clear. She identified herself as a federal magistrate judge for the Northern District of Texas and reached slowly into her pocket for her credentials. The leather case contained her judicial identification card, her bar, and a business card with the federal courthouse seal embossed in gold. She held it open, letting the light catch the official seals. Kline took the case, examined it. Then he laughed. The sound was sharp, cruel, meant to humiliate. He looked at Thompson, then back at Serena, his grin widening. He informed her that sure, she was a federal judge, and he was the governor of Texas. He photographed her ID with his phone, handed the case back, then he pulled out his handcuffs. Serena's mind went cold and quiet, the way it always did in moments of crisis. She stated clearly and calmly that she was a sitting federal magistrate, that this detention lacked probable cause, that she was invoking her Fourth Amendment rights. Her voice carried across the empty lot, steady as a metronome. Kline ignored her. He told her to turn around, hands behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut, too tight, the metal biting into her wrists. The pat-down was public, performative, designed to strip away dignity. Thompson stood watch, his nervous eyes scanning the darkness. From somewhere near the semi, a phone camera light glowed. They walked her to the cruiser. Kline opened the back door, placed his hand on her head, pushed her down into the seat the way he'd done 1,000 times before. The door slammed shut. The cage partitions smelled like sweat and industrial cleaner. As the cruiser pulled out of the Shell station, Serena pressed her forehead against the cold window. The numbers ran through her mind like a mantra, words she'd memorized in law school, words that had meant everything to her father. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches, and seizures shall not be violated. The detention center squatted low and grey on the edge of the county, all concrete and razor wire. They processed her in a white-tiled room that reeked of bleach. A young officer, barely out of his 20s, examined her judicial ID with growing uncertainty. He looked at Kline, then back at Serena. Kline told him to book her. Fingerprints, photograph, property inventory. They logged her credentials as personal effects, sealed them in a manila envelope. Then they led her to a holding cell, feet, concrete bench, and stainless steel toilet. The door clanged shut. Serena sat on the bench, her hands still aching from the cuffs. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother's face, the rise and fall of the ventilator, the promise she'd made in that small kitchen years ago. Time moved strangely in the cell. No windows, no clock, just the distant echo of voices and slamming doors. Then footsteps approached. A guard appeared, his face grim. He spoke through the slot in the door. Her mother had passed. The hospital had called. They were very sorry. Serena didn't move, didn't speak. She sat on that concrete bench while grief crushed the air from her lungs. While the fluorescent light hummed overhead, while everything she'd held together for years shattered in silence. They released her at dawn. A captain with greying temples and deep-set eyes appeared in the cell block, his face tight with controlled fury. He apologized. He verified her identity. He provided the names of the arresting officers. He assured her there would be an internal review. Serena signed the property release, took back her credentials, and walked out into the pale morning light. The Shell station was miles away. She called a rideshare, waited in the cold, rode in silence. Her Mercedes sat where she'd left it. Frost melted now, the pump receipt fluttering under the windshield wiper. She climbed in, started the engine, and drove home through empty streets. While somewhere online, videos of her arrest spread like wildfire, passed from phone to phone, viewed and shared by thousands who didn't yet know her name. She pulled into her driveway. Her phone rang before she reached the door. The chief judge's voice was clipped. Urgent. There was an emergency. Judge Lang had suffered a heart attack overnight. They needed someone to take over a trial starting. A civil rights case, high profile. Serena was the only magistrate available. She asked for the case name, Rivers versus Kline et al. The chief judge provided the details. Excessive force, racial profiling. The defendants were Kendall County deputies. Barrett, Kline, Harlan, Thompson. Serena stood in her driveway. Phone pressed to her ear and felt something shift in her chest. Not rage, not satisfaction, just the cold, clean clarity of purpose. She told the chief judge she'd be there. Then she went inside to put on her robe. The federal building rose stories above downtown Dallas, its glass and limestone facade reflecting the morning sun. News vans lined Commerce Street. Satellite dishes angled skyward. Reporters shouting questions at anyone who approached the entrance. The video from the Shell station had reached critical mass overnight. Social media exploded with hashtags. Local news picked it up at dawn. National outlets followed within the hour. Serena entered through the secured judge's entrance. Her robe pressed and perfect. Her hair pinned in its usual bun. She carried no visible weight from the night before. She'd learned long ago that grief was a private country, one you visited alone. Courtroom filled quickly. Spectators packed the gallery. Reporters claimed the front rows. Vaughn Rivers sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorneys. A black man in his early 40s wearing his dress uniform. The left side of his face still showing faint scars from the encounter that had brought them all here. His attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Kendra Voss, reviewed notes with the intensity of someone who knew they were making history. At the defense table, Barrett, Kline, and Harlan Thompson sat with their lawyer, a veteran of police misconduct cases who'd built a career on qualified immunity and procedural technicalities. They wore suits instead of uniforms, their expressions carefully neutral, the practiced composure of men who'd sat through depositions and settlements without consequence. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Serena entered from chambers, took the bench, arranged her materials with methodical precision. She looked out at the courtroom, her gaze sweeping across the packed gallery, the attorneys, the parties. Then she looked at the defense table. Kline saw her first. His face went slack, color draining like water from a broken dam. Thompson followed his partner's stare, and his mouth actually opened, a small sound escaping before he could stop it. Serena let the silence stretch. Let them understand. Let the moment calcify into something they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority, clear and dispassionate. She disclosed for the record that she had been detained by the defendants prior. The detention occurred at a Shell station on the highway. She was released after verification of her identity. She considered the matter relevant to the proceedings and wished to ensure transparency. The defense attorney shot to his feet, objecting, moving for recusal on grounds of bias and personal involvement. He cited precedent, argued judicial ethics, demanded a different judge. Serena denied the motion. She cited Liteki versus United States, noting that adverse rulings and prior involvement did not automatically demonstrate bias. She cited state precedent on judges presiding over cases involving their own arrests when the arrest itself was at issue. Her reasoning was airtight, supported by case law, delivered with the precision of someone who'd anticipated every argument. The trial began. Vaughn Rivers took the stand first, his posture military straight despite the tremor in his hands. His testimony unfolded in careful detail. The traffic stop on a Sunday evening. No reason given. The demand to exit his vehicle. The escalation when he asked why he was being stopped. Kline's knee on his neck. His face pressed into asphalt. The sound of his cheekbone fracturing. Thompson standing watch while Kline applied pressure. Minutes. The body camera footage that mysteriously corrupted. The hospital visit. The facial reconstruction surgery. Kendra Voss entered exhibits with surgical precision. Medical records showing the fractured zygomatic arch. Photographs of Vaughn's face swollen beyond recognition taken in the emergency room. The incomplete incident report that described the encounter as a routine traffic stop with minimal force used. Then came the screenshots. A forensic analyst had recovered deleted messages from a group chat involving deputies, including Kline and Thompson. The messages scrolled across the courtroom monitors, each one worse than the last. Jokes about arrest quotas in black neighborhoods. Memes about traffic stops. A message from Kline. Got 3 tonight, all driving while black. The jury, women and men, stared at the screens. 2 jurors wiped their eyes. One older white man in the back row shook his head slowly, his jaw clenched. The diner cook took the stand next, a nervous man named Preston Ruiz, who ran the all-night breakfast place across from the Shell station. He'd submitted security camera footage after seeing the news. The video played on the monitors. Clear angle, good lighting, Serena at the pump. The cruiser blocking her exit, the handcuffs, the pat down. Then after they loaded her into the cruiser, Kline and Thompson standing by their vehicle. Fist bumping, grinning, a moment of celebration before they drove away. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge from the previous night, a man Serena had never met, would have gavelled for order. Serena simply waited, letting the moment breathe, letting the jury absorb what they'd seen. Kendra Voss called Harlan Thompson as an adverse witness, a tactical move that forced him to testify for the plaintiff. Thompson took the stand, his face pale, his hands gripping the chair arms. The questioning started gently, establishing timeline and procedure. Then Voss pivoted. She asked about body camera protocols. Thompson confirmed they were required to activate cameras during all law enforcement encounters. She asked about the Rivers footage. Thompson hesitated, his eyes darting to Kline, to his attorney, back to Voss. The silence stretched. Serena watched without expression. Then Thompson broke. The words came in a rush, barely controlled. He confessed to deleting segments of body camera footage from the Rivers arrest. He admitted falsifying the incident report at Kline's direction. He described the quota system, the unspoken understanding that certain neighborhoods required higher arrest numbers, that certain demographics were easier targets. He detailed the group chat, the culture of impunity, the years of patterned behavior that had gone unchallenged. His attorney tried to intervene, but Thompson kept talking, as if some dam had burst and he couldn't stop the flood. He detailed other stops, other arrests, other moments when Kline had crossed lines and Thompson had looked away. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Kline took the stand with defiance etched in every line of his face. He denied the quota allegations, defended his record, insisted that every arrest was justified, every use of force reasonable. His attorney walked him through a carefully constructed narrative of difficult job conditions, split-second decisions, the dangers officers face daily. Then came cross-examination. Kendra Voss approached slowly, her voice calm. She asked Kline about his training on constitutional rights, about departmental policy on racial profiling, about the specific circumstances of Vaughan Rivers's arrest. Kline's answers grew shorter, more defensive. Voss introduced another exhibit, a training document Kline had authored for new deputies, one that suggested higher scrutiny in neighborhoods with demographic markers. She read passages aloud. Kline tried to explain context, tried to reframe intent. Voss asked one final question. She asked Kline directly whether he believed black individuals belonged in Kendall County. Kline's face flushed. He stated that people belonged where they had legitimate reasons to be, that he had nothing against anyone, that black people didn't belong in certain areas unless they had a damn good reason. The words hung in the air like a detonation. The courtroom exploded. Spectators shouted. Reporters typed furiously. The bailiff called for order while Serena gavelled once, twice, the sharp crack cutting through the chaos. Kendra Voss rested her case. During the afternoon recess, Serena made an extraordinary decision. She temporarily recused herself from the bench. A retired federal judge, Landon Forge, was brought in to preside over the next phase. Serena changed from her robe into the clothes she'd worn the night before, still sealed in an evidence bag, now returned. She took the stand as a witness. Under oath, she testified about the Shell station, the blocked exit, Kline's dismissal of her credentials, the handcuffs, the pat-down, the cell. The moment she learned her mother had died, she spoke without emotion, each word precise, each detail documented. She established the pattern, the methodology, the casual cruelty that characterized Kline's approach to his authority. Then, Kendra Voss introduced one final exhibit. A paralegal had been conducting deep forensic analysis of old case files, looking for patterns in Kline and Thompson's arrest records going back decades. The search had uncovered something unexpected. An assault case. A black man named Ronan Caldwell beaten and left for dead on Farm Road. The investigating officers had been Kline and Thompson, then rookie deputies. The case file showed minimal investigation. No suspects identified. The file was closed. The forensic report noted inconsistencies, witness statements that were never followed up, physical evidence that disappeared from the evidence locker, a pattern of deliberate negligence that looked in retrospect like cover-up. Ronan Caldwell had been Serena's father. The connection landed like thunder in the courtroom. Serena sat on the witness stand, her face composed, her hands folded, while her entire history became public record. The childhood memory, the promise, the decades of work that had led to this moment. The night she'd been arrested while saying goodbye to the last parent she had left. Every piece fit together with terrible precision. As the weight of this revelation settled over the proceedings, as reporters scribbled and spectators whispered, and the jury sat in stunned attention, it became impossible not to consider how deeply old injustices can echo through time, how buried truths have a way of surfacing when we least expect them. Do you think moments like this still happen in courtrooms today, where the past and present collide, where hidden connections finally come to light? Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on why exposing these long-buried truths matters, or if you've seen justice delayed but not denied. And share this video to keep this conversation going, because these stories need to be told. Judge Forge called a brief recess. Serena stepped down, changed back into her robe, and resumed the bench. The jury was sent to deliberate with instructions that covered excessive force, racial profiling, qualified immunity, and punitive damages. They returned. The jury foreman was a middle-aged white woman who'd sat in the back row throughout the trial, her face increasingly troubled as evidence mounted. She stood when the judge called for the verdict, holding the verdict form with both hands, unanimous on all counts. Liability established for both deputies in the excessive force claim against Vaughan Rivers. Liability established for both deputies in the racial profiling claim. Compensatory damages for medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. Punitive damages allocated per deputy. Total award, millions. The courtroom erupted again, but this time with different energy. Vaughan Rivers bent forward, his shoulders shaking. His attorney placed a hand on his arm. In the gallery, people wept openly. Reporters rushed for the exits, phones already raised. Serena gavelled for order, then turned to address the room. Her voice carried the weight of finality. She ordered immediate equitable relief beyond the monetary judgment. Both deputies were suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending criminal investigation. She mandated the implementation of always-on body cameras for all Kendall County deputies, with footage automatically uploaded to an independent server. She ordered the creation of a civilian oversight board with subpoena power and independent investigative authority. She appointed a federal monitor to oversee policy reforms for a minimum of years. She directed that Kline's training materials be purged from all county systems and ordered both deputies to undergo full recertification before any future law enforcement employment, though she noted the likelihood of such employment was minimal given the verdict and findings. Finally, she made a statement for the record. She noted that the Constitution binds every officer who swears an oath, that violations of constitutional rights through systematic racial profiling or deliberate evidence tampering represent a betrayal of public trust, that the badge carries not just authority, but responsibility, and when that responsibility is abandoned, accountability must follow. The trial concluded, the aftermath unfolded in layers. Harlan Thompson cooperated fully with federal prosecutors, pleading guilty to civil rights violations and evidence tampering. His sentence included years in federal prison followed by supervised release. Upon completion, he enrolled in a community college criminal justice program and eventually became a paid consultant for police academies across Texas, teaching constitutional policing and using his own failures as case studies in what happens when culture overrides law. Barrett Kline attempted to mount a media defense, giving interviews that painted him as a victim of political correctness and judicial overreach. The strategy backfired spectacularly. The video of Serena's arrest played on loop across news networks. The group chat messages were read aloud on cable news. Public opinion turned savage. Kline resigned from the sheriff's office before he could be formally terminated, lost his pension in civil proceedings, and faded into obscurity. The Kendall County Sheriff's Department underwent wholesale reform. The Civilian Oversight Board began operations. Body camera compliance reached high levels. Complaint procedures were streamlined. Use of force incidents dropped in the first year. Months after the verdict, Serena stood in Greenwood Cemetery in Dallas, placing flowers on 2 graves side by side. Her father's headstone was weathered grey granite, the dates marking a life cut short. Her mother's was fresh white marble, still sharp-edged and new. She knelt between them, her hand touching each stone in turn. She told them about the trial, about Vaughan Rivers, about the reform spreading through the county, about keeping the promises she'd made, first as a child in the back of a pickup, then as a young woman in a hospital corridor. Vaughan Rivers used his settlement for reconstructive surgery that restored some mobility to his damaged jaw. He enrolled in law school at Southern Methodist University the following fall. His application essay focused on civilian oversight and constitutional accountability. He founded a veterans advocacy organization that provided free legal assistance to service members facing discrimination. The organization grew, supported by grants and donations, eventually serving hundreds of veterans across North Texas. Community policing shifted gradually. Traffic stops in historically black neighborhoods became more measured, more respectful. Complaints decreased. Trust fractured for generations began the slow work of repair. It wasn't perfect. Systems don't transform overnight. But the trajectory changed. Serena accepted appointment as chair of the Civilian Oversight Board while maintaining her federal docket. She presided over hearings, reviewed use of force reports, pushed for transparency at every level. The work was exhausting, often frustrating, punctuated by setbacks and resistance, but it mattered. One evening in early fall, driving home from the federal courthouse, she passed the Shell station on the highway. The pumps were lit, familiar and ordinary. A young black man stood at the pump, filling an older sedan. A sheriff's cruiser sat at another pump. The deputy inside drinking coffee, glancing occasionally at the other customer with casual disinterest, but no hostility. No performative authority, just the ordinary coexistence of two people occupying the same space. Serena drove on at home in her study. The sweatshirt she'd worn that night hung in a simple frame on the wall beside her law degree. A small brass plaque beneath it read, "For them, so no one else has to be small." She opened her laptop, skimming through emails. One caught her attention. Vaughn Rivers had written to tell her his first-year grades had posted. He'd made law review. He wanted to thank her, not just for presiding fairly, but for showing him what the law could be when wielded with precision and purpose. Attached was his seminar paper proposal, Constitutional Limits on Qualified Immunity in Cases of Racial Profiling. Serena smiled, typed a brief congratulatory response, then closed the laptop. Tomorrow, she had oral arguments on a complex immigration matter, followed by a civilian oversight hearing, reviewing body camera protocols. The work continued, unending but necessary. Each small step forward, building towards something larger. She thought of her parents, of promises made and kept, of a 9-year-old girl in the back of a pickup, watching her father's humiliation and vowing that things would change. Things had changed. Not enough, perhaps. Not everywhere. But here in this county, in these courtrooms, in the slow accumulation of precedent and policy and accountability, justice advanced one step at a time, one case at a time, one promise kept. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.